Good evening, everyone. It's Rabbi Dr. Jack Cohen with the Torah Anytime Dating and Shalom Bayis series. I hope everyone is doing well in this lockdown. Tonight we're going to get some tremendous inspiration. We're going to start with some beautiful stories because obviously we have to speak to the times, what's going on in our lives. And so I'm going to start with that. Before I do that, I want to just put a plug out there for Partners in Shidduchim, an organization that I admire tremendously, built by a very courageous and woman, Bailey Yaniv, who's doing her utmost to help Klal Yisrael build new Jewish homes. I use this site a lot as a magachir, as well as a dating coach and as a shadchan to help many people. So I urge anyone out there who knows people that are single, you can go on there and create a profile for someone you know, or have them create their own profiles. It's such a wonderful tool. You can customize the search to the kind of individual that you think would best match you with the individual that you know. So Partners in Shidduchim is the way to go. In addition, anyone out there, anywhere in the world who needs help in Shidduchim or who needs help in creating a top 10 list or would like for me to help them in consultation to see how it's going with the relationship, Baruch Hashem, I've been doing that all day today, these past weeks, with people who are going out, who have questions or are not sure. Just reach out to me. I'm at 305-206-1916. Best way to get me is send me a WhatsApp message that you need an appointment or a text, and I'll get on it, and Be'ezus Hashem I'll tell you how we operate, and I'll get you on the program so we can help you. The best thing that one needs today is guidance, more than ever, and direction. So if you're not sure, marriage is too important, too critical a decision to leave just to a guessing game. I'd like to start tonight's presentation, because I said it would be related and very much devoted to what's going on in the world today, with a beautiful story in terms of Corona. Listen to what's going on here. A lady writes, my husband and I are the co-founders and principals of a school for children for underprivileged backgrounds. These are children from broken homes, children who come from divorced homes, children with all types of behavioral and emotional issues. So she writes, we educate them virtually tuition free. We pay for their bar or bar mitzvah lessons, including their bar mitzvahs, invite them and their families for Shabbos, and when the time comes, we help them with shidduchim. And we marry off many of them. This, of course, is not just a job, but it's our calling in life. Many of us have a calling, that passion that calls out, what am I doing with myself? What am I doing to help further Klal Yisrael? What am I doing to make this world a better place? So this lady writes that she and her husband had a calling to create a school for kids from underprivileged backgrounds. For the past 2 decades, we really have taken a day off, even in the summer when we struggle to get our students into camps and keep an eye on their progress, because as we all know, as educators, you can do a wonderful job from September through June. But if you have a summer which is messed up, then the child can get terribly off the road. So we want to ensure that. So she writes, under normal circumstances, covering payroll with a non-existent tuition base is already a huge issue. What she's saying is that many of the parents in this school and the student body can't even pay the tuition, so they have to always raise those funds. But when COVID-19 disrupted everyday life and closed the schools, my husband and I were faced with a serious problem. We hadn't paid our teachers in 5 months, and we were now expecting them to continue distance learning for several hours a day via Zoom. Imagine being a teacher, you haven't been paid for 5 months, and now you're being asked to continue the work under Zoom. But our dedicated teachers rose to the challenge, graciously extending themselves above and beyond, preparing lessons that were stimulating and keeping in constant touch with the students and their families. How we yearned to send them a paycheck just to boost their morale, but we didn't have the money. How we yearned to give them the courage to continue, but we were heavily in debt and unable to borrow more money. It was then that we began to hear rumors about the Coronavirus Relief Act. Many of you are well aware there's something called the CARE Act that released billions of dollars into the market for for interest-free loans. And she said that I did some research and discovered that the $2 trillion act passed by Congress contained funding for education. This included a paycheck protection program worth billions of dollars to cover the payroll costs for businesses and nonprofits such as ours. These are interest-free loans. So I was told you should really call your bank and apply. A lot of schools are paying their teachers now with the help of these programs. It was a real bracha, a real blessing. I wasted no time in calling our bank manager, Pedro, who had been handling our school's account for years. Pedro was very gracious but apologetic. He said to me, I'd called too late in the game. Everyone beat us and all the money was gone. I'd called too late. The initial flurry of funds had already been given out, and there was a lengthy waiting list. There's not much I could do. I wish I could help, he said. It's such a shame that you waited so long to call me. Why didn't you tell me about this program earlier? I asked him, frustrated. Mrs. Lang, we've been closed and can barely keep up with the backlog. I'm returning phone calls all day long, and many of our clients are very frustrated and take it out on me. Please try to understand my predicament. I do understand, I told Pedro. You've been nothing but a friend to our school, but we really are desperate. If we don't get some kind of assistance in the very near future, we might be forced to close the school. That would mean that hundreds of children from underprivileged homes would be on the streets without a school to go back to for next year. God forbid. Pedro, the manager, shared our pain, but his hands were tied. Well, what can we say? This is B'shert. This is how Hashem wanted it. If Hashem wanted us to have this source of funding, we would have heard about it earlier. Obviously he didn't, or received the money another way. As our conversation was winding down to a close, Pedro added, perhaps you can try a smaller bank that's not as busy as us. I wouldn't get my hopes up, but hey, it doesn't hurt to try. I thanked him, I put down the phone, wondering if I should even bother. If Pedro, with whom we had a strong working relationship, was unable to do anything, why would a random bank manager from another bank that doesn't know me, who has never heard of our school, offer any kind of assistance at all? It's not your job to make cheshbonos, I said to myself. It's not your job to worry about how God runs the world. You have to do your ishtadlus. You have to do your effort. I reminded myself, although my husband and I ran the school together, covering the payroll was mostly my burden. 3 banks and endless games of phone tag later, I was no closer to my goal. I was about to concede defeat and just give in and throw in the towel when I decided to call the last bank on my list. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a lesson in not giving up. This was a small regional bank with which we had never done business before. I dialed the number in my mind already on my expecting to be told no. The phone was answered by a bored bank teller who directed me to her supervisor, who heard me out and transferred me to a manager. By now, I was so fed up and rattled that I just told my request in a very matter-of-fact manner. Whom did you say you were representing? Asked the manager, whose name was David. I told the name of our school and added that I was the founder and administrator of a school for underprivileged Jewish children. Suddenly he asked the question, is this Mrs. Lang? His voice was charged with excitement. Yes, I said. Why do you want to know? You're Maura Lang? Don't you remember me? I'm David Green. David, is that you? How are you? I haven't heard from you in over 10 years. David was one of our early students in the first few years that we were in operation. He was a skinny boy who came from a chaotic family background. David, who had severe behavioral problems, had been enrolled in our school by an uncle, and he immediately gave his teachers a run for their money. He was constantly being thrown out of class. I remember the endless classroom disruptions that David had provided for us, his pranks and impulsive tricks. And some of the teachers had declared that either David gets thrown out of the school or they leave, but we stuck with David. We never gave up. We refused to give up on him. It took years of effort and determination and a lot of prayers, but eventually David buckled down to his studies and began to thrive. He had graduated from our school 11 years ago with honors, and we kept up with him for a while before we lost touch. David informed me that he had since graduated from college with a degree in business administration and was now the manager of the bank. He was happily married and the father of a little boy. He and his wife were now taking wonderful steps to becoming more frum and religious, and were thinking of making their kitchen kosher. Maura Lang, you're our hero. You have no idea. You changed my life. You're responsible for all my success, he tells her. You don't have to say another word. I know all about your school. It saved my life. And I'll move heaven and earth to get you the money no matter what. David was as good to his word. Even though the funding was almost completely gone, David was able to snatch the last few bits of money from there and was able to pull a few strings to get us that loan and keep us alive. And to think that I almost didn't bother making that phone call because I was sure nothing would have come of it anyway. And that's the lesson we have to learn with shidduchim. You got to keep at it. When I talk to my clients and I tell them, you just got to keep at it. If it doesn't go with one, you just got to, you got to keep at it. You got to stay motivated. You got to stay inspired. You can't give up. It's so important. So I'd like to read you a beautiful letter that was written to a Rav from a Corona Kala. Dear Rabbi, I'm a Kala who will be getting married in the near future. Never in my life did I imagine that my chasana would take place in the middle of a pandemic, making all my wedding plans go up in smoke. And frankly, that makes me sad, so sad. Sometimes I think I'm crazy that I'm so sad. I'm getting married to a wonderful boy, a top boy with so many wonderful qualities. On the other hand, I can't help but feel so sorry for myself. It's so hard to accept the reality that my friends and even siblings won't be able to attend my simcha. Ladies and gentlemen, one of my favorite first cousins is having a wedding this Sunday. I will not be there. It's in the Jersey Shore. She'll probably have 20, 25 people. I wished her a mazel tov. When she asked me a month ago what to do, I said, I want to suggest, I want to advise you, go through with the wedding as quickly as possible. Forget about it. As I said several weeks ago, to all the kallahs, to all the chasanim and kallahs of this era, Hashem will pay you back. He'll take care of you. So listen to what happens. I can't help feeling sorry for myself. It's so hard to accept the reality that my friends and even siblings won't be able to attend my simcha, and that I'll never know what it was like to be the center of attention in a big hall. Up until now, I was able to accept the situation as is. But over the last few weeks, as the chasana day draws nearer and nearer, I can't keep myself from crying. I really want to accept this test, this nisayon that Hashem has sent me. I'm doing my best. Listening to Shurim, I'm Nemuna, listening to all the good things, listing all the good things Hashem has given me, trying to imagine that the chasana will be beautiful no matter how many people will attend. Sometimes it helps that I'm a happy kallah. What should I really be feeling, she asks. What are the right thoughts I should have in preparation for such a wedding? Am I allowed to be sad, or does that mean that I'm lacking in emunah? All wonderful questions. I'm sure there are dozens of other kallahs or brides out there who are in the same situation in need of advice and chizuk. Now, here are the answer that this rabbi gave her. Beautiful response. And I need to share this with you. Without a doubt, it's difficult to see your plans fail to materialize, especially when they're plans that have been in existence for a very long time. Your anxiety in this case is perfectly understandable. At the same time, we must keep in mind that Hashem's plans for us are always far greater than our own. We can't tell. Surely He knows what's truly good for each of His creations, and as such, not only should we not be upset with our plans failing to materialize, we should be grateful that Hashem's plans have prevailed instead, because He knows what's best for us. As we say, as Rabbi Akiva said, whatever the merciful one does, He does for the best. As I've said, I'm sure you know this already, but I want to encourage you to continue to try to exercise your emunah even more. Though at times we feel it may be lacking, we assure you that your anxiety is normal and is to be expected in your situation, so do not falsely conclude that you are lacking in emunah, chas v'shalom. You have faith, and if you will continue your practice in it, it will only grow stronger. As you may know, an artisan in Lashon Kodesh, an artisan in Hebrew is called an uman because he practices his craft repeatedly until it becomes natural for him. Notwithstanding all of this, since we understand that you're struggling with this great ordeal right now, let's share with you another perspective that may appeal to your rational mind. In other words, the most important response to your current present situation is the need to have faith. However, if it will help calm you to have another answer, let's offer the following. I'm sure you know that the important thing is not the wedding, but the marriage. A wedding is an event that lasts a few hours. A marriage is eternal. It's a binyan ade'ad. It's a building that lasts forever. At a wedding quickly becomes part of the past, nothing more. But what are you left with after a wedding? Pictures and a video. A marriage is your investment in your future, a holy union that produces generations of children and children's children occupied in Torah mitzvahs. After all, when you were davening to Hashem, you didn't ask for a wedding, you asked for a husband. Hashem didn't guarantee you'd get 400 or 500 people in the hall, but He gave you what you asked for, a husband. We have no doubt that if you were given a choice to exchange future happiness of your marriage for a festive wedding with 400 or 500 people, you would never accept such a proposition. Would you rather have a small wedding and a fantastic future, or a big wedding now with no guarantee that you would have shalom bayis? After all, why would you trade something eternal for something which is fleeting that lasts a few hours? Therefore, we ask you to consider the following. While it's understandable, ideally you would want both a wedding to your liking as well as a happy marriage, it doesn't make sense for you to be focused so much now on your wedding when you should be focused on the spiritual preparations towards your marriage, which is, how am I doing in my midos? How am I doing in growing my character, perfecting my flaws, or eliminating my flaws? We understand that you're disappointed, and most brides should be, and would be. But there are really much more important things right now that will affect your happiness for the rest of your life, far more than the kind of wedding celebration that you would have. Indeed, you have a special opportunity. In our day, it has become far too common for brides and grooms to become unnecessarily involved in wedding preparations. It's not their business. They become preoccupied with party planning when they should be preparing themselves spiritually for the next phase of their lives. Taking stock of themselves as singles. How am I doing? Where am I holding? Am I patient? Am I kind? Am I generous? Have I converted from the I mentality to the we mentality? That's what you should be working on before your wedding. They become too occupied with things that are not important instead of the spiritual stuff. When you build a new home, you must place a guardrail around your roof, the Torah tells us, which can be understood to mean that one who builds a new home by entering into marriage must build a guardrail by becoming even stronger in their observance of mitzvah. So you should be now taking stock of what is your responsibility and what is your attitude towards doing mitzvahs. It's self-understood what a misuse of precious time and energy it is to become too distracted with other matters during this pivotal time that will affect the rest of your life. It's far more important to spend this time now working on yourself, doing whatever you can to improve your quality of character. In this sense, you have an opportunity because your situation allows you to focus completely on that which will bring you true and lasting happiness. In the Sheva Brachas, with which we bless the Chassan and Kala, we ask Hashem to grant them joy, as you gladdened your first creations in Garden of Eden. We ask Hashem that we should give gladness and happiness to this current Chassan and Kala that are standing under this chuppah right now, just like you gave it to Adam and Chava. In other words, one of the greatest blessings we could hope for a new couple is that they should be like the very first couple, Adam and Chava, who were married in Gan Eden. Now, guess what? How many people came to Adam and Chava's wedding? Hashem, that's it. We know that Adam and Chava had no one to invite to their wedding, no family, no friends, no guests at all. Indeed, the Medrash tells us that Hashem officiated and that the Malachim, Michael and Gabriel, acted as the ushers. And yet we bless every Chassan and Kala that they should be as happy as Adam and Chava, who had no one attend their wedding, at least no humans attend their wedding, but Hashem and several Malachim. So we see here what's important is the eternal happiness and joy that you can create in your marriage versus the fleeting few hours that may pass by from the wedding. I'd like to tell a story about a Kala who says she was one of the last weddings that took place, and from that I'll pivot into Shalom Bayis a little bit. She was one of the last weddings that took place right before the lockdown. Our Chassan, as she writes, has come to be known as the last wedding. We got married right before the full coronavirus lockdown. 2 weeks later, my husband and I found ourselves hunkered down in our cozy little apartment along with the rest of the world, indefinitely. I can't help feeling as if I got married and then the entire world just blew up. Usually when you first get married, you go out together, Shana Rishona, you live it up, you go out, coffee, restaurants, meet each other after work. It's a time of fun and celebration and cocooning and getting to know each other, setting up house, having fun. You visit your parents and your friends. You have date nights and shared experiences. Now, however, it was just us, the couch and the kitchen. Even going to the supermarket, which could have been a fun activity under normal circumstances, was tense and uncomfortable. Nothing is fun right now in the classical sense. We're spending a lot of time together, yes, which is good on one hand, but on the other, it's taking place in a small apartment and you can't get out. I will admit that being cooped up on top of the pervasive underlying tension that seems to grip everyone these days has been giving me a shorter temper than usual, so my husband's getting to see the real side of me much sooner than he might have been pre-coronavirus. To add another layer of challenge, my husband and I both lost a grandparent to COVID-19 within a week and a half of each other. Grieving, feeling vulnerable, and trying to support our bereaved parents without even being able to visit them is enough to bring anyone close to the breaking point. Imagine you're a brand new Chassan and Kala. Each one of you both lose a grandfather. You can't even go visit and pay a shiva call. Could you imagine what a test that is for a fresh husband and wife, a fresh couple? On the positive side, because we're spending so much time in each other's company, our conversations range from the deep and the profound to the really silly. We make cookies and fancy dinners. Together, things that are under normal circumstances we probably would never have done. Still, we never anticipated spending so many weeks together with no distractions in sight. It can make getting used to a new reality that much harder than the usual Shana Rishona in the olden days. I honestly feel like we've been married for a few years instead of just 6 weeks. We've already lived through things that most people wouldn't have gone through in 20 years. We dealt with loss, we dealt with grief, we dealt with terror, tension, and all types of other challenges. I never thought that a couple of weeks into my marriage, I'd be bawling my eyes out to my husband about my fears and anxieties about if I ever get a fever. It's really hard not to be able to be with our families. My mother is one of the most amazing, sympathetic people on the planet, and she lives right near me. But I haven't been able to hug her since my wedding, including give her a hug to give her support when she lost her mother. During this very stressful period, she lost her own mother, my beloved grandmother, which was such an enormous tragedy. But even while sitting Shiva alone and dealing with her own feelings, she always made sure to check in on me and be there for me. Our first Seder was celebrated completely alone, my husband and I, after we weren't even planning on making Pesach at all. It was such a downer that I was hardly in the mood for it. But I must say that there was something nice about the experience that Seder this year. My husband told me all of his family tunes, and we exchanged family stories and traditions. It was nice, but I don't want to do it again. I do think that despite the challenges, and there are definitely challenges, we're coming out on top, although we have our low moments too. That's just the way it is with everything that's going on these days. This is the kind of challenge where you can either break down and say, that's it, I can't handle this, or accept it as an opportunity to rise above the circumstances and do the best that you can. This is the kind of times that really tests and turns people into great human beings. You can be an optimist or a pessimist. It's up to you. It's all about your attitude, ladies and gentlemen. Which road will you choose? Now, here's some ideas and thoughts for people that are people that are Shana Rishona couples to make the most of their unique experience. So some ideas and some advice to people who just recently got married. Yes, you're on lockdown, but nobody's saying you can't go out for a short walk. Put your mask on and gloves and go get a little fresh air. 2, even with the confines of your apartment, make yourselves a daily schedule. It's critical. You just got to have a schedule, especially these days, or you'll be aimlessly wandering. Get a schedule going. Organize yourself into a schedule. A schedule is a wonderful thing for a young couple. Not only does it give you something to fill the day, it provides a sense of stability. Right now with the coronavirus, hello? Hello? This back. You need a schedule. Not only does it give you something to fill the day, it provides a sense of stability. Right now with the coronavirus, the days can be endless. You wake up in the morning and there's nothing to run out for and nothing to come back to. It can feel very dreary. To combat the monotony, sit down and write down a schedule that works for both of you. It can be very detailed or very casual, whatever suits your style. Create your own make-believe real world. While couples are usually advised to spend time together when they're both at home rather than chatting with friends on the phone, it's essential that each spouse carve out some personal time for themselves. Designate certain times during the day that are together times and others that are separate, so that you could be times that you have together and times you could be alone. Your spouse will figure out what to do when you're having alone time. Next, laugh a little. Laugh at yourself, play games together, and try to have some fun. Next, whenever possible, connect to other people. Call your friends, call your family, call your siblings. Very important. Most importantly, whether you're preparing for a scaled-back wedding due to the virus or you're already married, take heart. By and large, the reviews are positive. This past Shabbos, I went out for a walk with my wife with our masks and our gloves, and I happened to run into a friend who introduced me to a caterer, and I couldn't help but ask him, what's it like these days? And he told me, yes, he's making smaller weddings, but he says that the fulfillment and the joy that's radiating from them is just as good as the weddings that he used to make for 400 or 500 people, maybe even so more. So it's most of the reviews, if not all the reviews, have been positive, because people have been seeing how the beauty of making a wedding and just the sheer joy that they can have with a small group. Now, in order to be able to be successful at getting Shalom Bayis going, you need to be able to grow together. How do we grow together as spouses? Well, let me give you some beautiful insights. One thing you want to be able to share is your desire to grow with each other. Certainly no one should go into a marriage expecting to change the spouse. But once you're married, you may find yourself sensitized to a certain value. For example, you want to work on not speaking Lashon Hara. You want to work on eliminating your anger. You want to work on becoming more patient. And you want your lifestyle to reflect this. If your spouse doesn't join you in this endeavor, the two of you can't form a unit. You have to want to grow together. It's like your right arm growing and your left arm not growing. Even worse, their insensitivity to your new values may drive you crazy. So how do you inspire your spouse to grow with you? One way is by sharing what inspired you. Another is by talking about the value you're seeking to strengthen. For example, you can tell stories or divrei Torah about it at the Shabbos table. To truly influence your spouse, two elements are required. First of all, you've got to be a personal example. The Gemara relates that a tree in Rav Yana's yard extended into the public domain. His tree was extending into the public domain. Someone had a similar tree to which the public objected. The man asked Rav Yana whether he had to cut down his tree. Rav Yana promised him that he'll rule on it the next day as to what that person should do regarding that person's tree extending into the public domain. But guess what happened? That night, Rav Yana went to his own garden and chopped down the tree that he was also having a problem with. His tree was also projecting into the public, and he was also committing the same crime. The following day, instructed that person who came to ask the question to cut down his tree. And the man protested, "But Rabbi, you also have such a tree. Why must one come down while yours remains standing?" So Rabbi Yana told him, "Go to my garden and see if it's still standing. If my tree is cut down, then yours has to come down as well." Why didn't Rabbi Yana just say, "Go cut down your tree and I'll cut mine off"? The Gemara explains that he acted in accordance with something that Reish Lakish, who was an Amora, tells us. Clean yourselves of straw and then clean others of straw. What is he teaching us? First, take care of yourself and then go give tochacha to someone else. To influence the man to cut down the tree, Rav Yana first had to cut down his own. So before we go telling someone what to do, if we suffer from the same fault, we better make sure that we correct the fault in ourselves before we go and start to preach to other people. To inspire your spouse to grow with you, it's not just enough to speak about it and how you want them to change. You have to actually begin changing yourself. If they see you behaving with increased sensitivity or spending more time learning Torah or helping others, that will have a greater impact than just talking about the lofty changes you want them to make. Actions indeed speak louder than words. Number two, if you want your spouse to grow with you, you've got to see the good. The Gemara discusses the question of witnesses who testified that they saw the new moon. In the olden days, it wasn't like we had calendars today. Rather, two witnesses would come to Yerushalayim and they would give testimony that they saw the new moon. The witnesses would give the testimony, and if it was credible, then the Beis Din would say, Mekudash, Mekudash, it's sanctified, and Rosh Chodesh was proclaimed. They tell us that if the witnesses report that the concavity of the moon, which is like the concavity was the inside of a banana, is facing the sun, the Gemara tells us these two witnesses are surely lying, since the sun has never seen the pigima, which is the concavity of the moon, because the moon will be disheartened. The pigima is the fault. The Gemara's choice of words is very unusual. The sun can't see, the moon isn't disheartened. These are inanimate objects after all. And the term pigima, which means a fault, a character fault, connotes a deep flaw. Why is the Gemara using such imagery, such strong language? And the Baal Shem Tov explains that the rabbis are teaching us a phenomenal lesson about effecting influence on someone else. We've got to learn from the sun, whose light influences the moon. To influence and elevate your spouse, you must not view them as flawed. Their shortcomings must be regarded as superficial. Don't make a big deal about it. Otherwise, you won't be able to make an impact, and they'll be disheartened. Such a perspective on your spouse is crucial for two reasons. In order for them to learn from you, they have to trust you. They must feel safe enough to share their emotions and experiences with you. They'll develop that sense of security only if they know that you appreciate them. And you've got to be able to verbalize, "Honey, thank you. I appreciate that you made dinner. I appreciate that you picked up the laundry. I appreciate that you helped with the kids." You've got to say it. To overcome the challenges of change and growth, your spouse must recognize their own inner greatness, and you've got to let them know that they have it. They have to believe they can change. If you view them as flawed, they'll see themselves in the same light, and they won't be able to access their strengths, their great qualities. They may even become defensive when you suggest change, even if they know they're right. Viewing your spouse as innately good is important for you as well. You cannot influence them unless you believe in them. If you lack faith in that, you won't be able to invest in their transformation, since you won't really think it can happen. Believe in your spouse, on the other hand, allows you to be more effective. In addition to these reasons to see the good in one another, there's a deeper dimension. Let me describe that deeper dimension. Hashem looks only at the virtues of the Jewish nation, at Klal Yisrael's virtues. And he says to us, you are completely beautiful, my beloved. There is no blemish in you. That's how God sees us. The great Kabbalist Rav Moshe Cordovero, who lived in the time of the Ari HaKadosh, and Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote the Shulchan Aruch, which is the 1500s of Tzfat, Spain. He wrote this great book called Tomer Devorah, notes that this quality is one of the 13 ascribed to God, where in Micha it says, Ki chafetz chesed, who Hashem loves to do kindness. Hashem desires the kindness one, and also Hashem desires the kindness one Jew does for another, and He remembers it in our favor. And just as Hashem acts this way towards the Jewish people, Rav Cordovero writes, we should do the same thing towards our fellow man. Even if a person slights or angers us, any redeeming good quality they possess, such as kindness to others, should override their negativity and our negativity towards them. Rav Cordovero concludes that this policy applies especially to our spouses. Even if they make mistakes, focus on all the wonderful things that they do for us and recognize them and recognize all the good that they have in their essence. Emulating Hashem is how we achieve closeness or devakus or attachment to God. And that's how we connect with Him. Through bonding with Hashem, man becomes a conduit for special powers. For example, the Ramchal, who was a great Musar special person, remarks that righteous individuals such as Eliyahu and Elisha were so attached to Hashem that they were able to revive the dead. We know the famous story that Elisha, he used to travel through Israel. One of the stops he had was the Isha Shunamit, this woman in which he used to lodge by her. He used to come often, so she decided to build an attic for him. And he said to her, how can I repay you for your kindness? And she said, well, she didn't say, she said, I'm okay. He said, you know what, you don't have children. So he promised her a son. She had a son. Unfortunately, something had happened and the son passed away, and then she came crying to him, why did you give me a son only to see to it that he would die? And Elisha put his mouth on the boy's mouth and was able to revive him and do Tchias HaMesim. That was the power, because they were so close to Hashem, because they emulated Hashem's ways. The same holds true of blessing. The stronger your connection to Hashem, the source of all blessing, the greater your ability to channel that blessing into the world. So the greater and closer that we get to Hashem, the greater is our ability to give blessing to others. When a person sees others in a good light, he's emulating Hashem, who sees us, the Jewish nation, as good. By connecting to the source of all blessing, you become a conduit for bracha yourself. In short, to bring blessing into this world, focus on the good around you. Like I always tell everyone, have a list of gratitudes that you thank for Hashem every day, and especially read the thank you card every day. So important. And to bring blessing into your marriage, focus on the good in your spouse. Chazal refer to the husband as the sun and the wife as the moon. The boy or the man is the giver and she's the receiver. He influences and she reflects that influence. Yet our rabbis also emphasize the wife's great influence over her husband. The Gemara describes how on Ben Pelet's wife, there was a rebellion, as you remember. Korach wanted to foment rebellion against Moshe Rabbeinu because he was angry that he didn't get the position of leader of his tribe. So the Gemara tells us how On Ben Pelet's wife dissuaded him from joining Korach's rebellion. On Ben Pelet was a person, and Korach was trying to capture him and take him and tell him to come and join the rebellion with him. He wanted to induct him into his group. So she said to him, if Moshe wins, you'll be his disciple. And if Korach wins, you'll be his disciple. So what have you got to gain by going against Moshe? If Korach wins, you gain anything. Whatever happens, you'll gain nothing. So don't get involved in this rebellion. It's not good for you. Korach's wife, on the other hand, egged him on, reminding him of all the injustices Moshe had committed to him, or the perceived injustices. So are wives influential? You bet they are. One rabbi tells us that these two concepts of spousal influence are amazing. The husband is the primary influence. He is the one who controls the values. He determines the energy and hashkafa and yer shemaim in the home. Then the wife mirrors that input and okay, we're good. Okay, here we go. So how do you criticize when criticism is in order? First of all, let's say this. Criticism is occasionally in order. How do you know when to criticize? Ask yourself, first of all, one question. Was the behavior really so bad? Will it ever happen again, or was it a fluke? You don't have to point out everything that they do wrong. Okay, now, how to criticize? If and when criticism is unavoidable, how it's conveyed and how often can significantly affect the way it's received. The Gemara describes how to rebuke. Let the left hand push away, but the right hand draw close. The Yad Ramah explains that this is a rabbi, that the right hand represents the dominant hand. Thus, our rabbis are telling us to be more encouraging than discouraging. That means your positive has to outweigh your negative. Give me 1 second. Let me make sure. You have to give more encouragement than discouragement. Why? Constructive criticism requires that the recipient, in this case your spouse, has to be strong enough to face it and accept it and to work on it. Otherwise, it won't be effective. To help that person develop that strength, you must make them feel good about themselves. So there's a popular critiquing technique known as the compliment sandwich, and that's how we use it. This method is touted as polite, but an effective way to criticize without disheartening the person who's about to be the recipient of your criticism. Here's how it's done. Decide where the person needs to improve. Think of something related that they do well. For instance, if an employee is always late, try highlighting how he gets straight to work once he arrives, or how he volunteers to stay late. So start with a compliment on something good that person does. Choose another loosely rated strength to remark on. And you should deliver the first compliment. Hey, Gary, you're already hard at work? Wow, you just got here? And then state where you would like to see improvement. It's almost 10 to 10. You've been late a lot recently. Maybe you need to find a way to miss that morning traffic. And then finish with another compliment. Oh, by the way, your car looks fantastic. So you started with a compliment. You say something which requires a little bit of change and a little criticism in a very nice way. And then you end off with a compliment. So therefore, that's how we want to do it. Choose your words carefully, not on the spot. Don't raise your voice, even slightly. Don't sound irritated. Don't look angry, bitter, or annoyed, resentful, or disappointed. Remain calm. Your spouse will almost always detect anger, so don't approach them until you're over it. Even if waiting for yourself to calm down makes you critique them less, that's fine. It's better than sensing your anger, which can be devastating and leave tremendously terrible consequences. Lastly, choose your battles. Criticism is a dangerous pursuit. People don't like to be criticized, and they get very defensive, and they certainly will have negative feelings towards you, especially when applied to your spouse. If you must criticize, do so sparingly, do so sensitively, and within the context of a loving, supporting relationship. Now, while we're at there, I want to make a few comments about commitment versus divorce. We believe there would be fewer divorces if from the earliest possible moment, parents and educators would instill better values in children, teaching them to be more caring, less me-oriented, less spoiled, and more mature, more responsible, more sharing. Rather than hiding or ignoring the issues, parents should recognize and address their children's emotional issues before sending them into a marriage which leaves them not ready and creating damage for themselves and other people. Unfortunately, studies show that today most divorces are because in our disposable society, everyone wants instant gratification. How many times have I lectured on that? If something doesn't work, we just throw it away and assume we'll just buy a new one. Just as we dispose of our used styrofoam coffee cup, we easily can dispose of our no longer wanted spouse. Of course, there are times when getting rid of the cup is the healthiest move. The old saying, through sickness and in health, for better and for worse, for richer or poor, until death do us part, has been replaced with, until a problem arises, we're on board with you. Such a tragedy in terms of how society has changed. One woman in her 70s said, in my day, it was put up, shut up, and go on. That's what we all did. But current statistics show that over 60% of marriages are ending in divorce. And that over a 40-year period, chances of a first marriage ending in divorce is as great as 70%. Thankfully, statistics are lower in the Orthodox community, but sadly, it's increasing at a very quick rate. Studies report that half of all divorces occur in the first 7 years, and many couples split in the first 2 years of marriage. Second marriages have a 10% higher chance of failure than do first marriages. Unfortunately, many couples want to throw in the towel as soon as they have differences. They turn everything into a disagreement and make everything seem overwhelming and stressful. An uptight couple sought help from a rabbi who gave them a brilliant one-word piece of advice. Chill. Just learn to chill. Marriage and its responsibilities can suddenly shake up a newlywed. Keep calm. Don't get judgmental. Don't analyze every word and move your spouse makes. Don't get scared that all of life's burdens will tumble down on you. Marriage is serious, but you should retain that wonderful feeling of dating and getting to know one another. If you discover a character flaw along the way that you were unaware of, Okay, your attitude should be, I'll work on it. We'll both work on it. Hopefully you'll discover many other outstanding qualities about your spouse that will offset the less appealing revelations you came to discover. Work on accentuating the positive. Work on accentuating the positive feelings and eliminating all those things that negative that are bothering you. If you do this for your spouse and your spouse does it for you, you'll both feel good about each other. The keys to a good, solid marriage are what we call the 6 C's. Number 1, caring for each other. Number 2, communicating with each other. Number 3, cooperating with each other. Number 4, compromising with each other. Number 5, committing to each other. And lastly, number 6, creating a strong friendship. Always make sure that overriding feeling is one of connecting and liking one another. As soon as a disagreement takes place, deal with it. Go into the 6 C's mode and let these issues subside. Sometimes when a couple feels bored or things seems to be getting monotonous, the partners are not interested in the marriage anymore. And that's a terrible mistake. Both of you must fight for the survival of your marriage. Learn what makes that marriage needs to make it work and thrive, and work on it. Appreciate some of the monotony may be because things are going smoothly. And that's good. You know, the old saying, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. So if there's monotony, that means things are okay. Challenges of marriage make the road bumpier. But dealing with these challenges often serves to strengthen a marriage. If you feel related to your spouse, you'll treat them like a relative. Whenever you have a difference of opinion with your mother or upset with your father or feel annoyed with your brother and sister, you don't just decide to cut them out and divorce them, we hope. You accept the relationship as a lifetime one and you work on it. You may experience many emotions about your spouse, but the overriding feeling is one of belonging together. Perhaps you don't feel crazy about your mother right now, but you don't negate the wonderful feelings you usually feel for her. You don't cut her off. That love is constant, and so should the same feeling be with your husband or wife. So too, a person should continuously feel an underlying love for their spouse, despite a temporary annoyance. Okay, once in a while we get on each other's nerves, but we can make up and we can move on. By establishing a calm island of stability, a person can handle the ups and downs of their life without the fear that causes a person to rush out of the water. If you continually threaten your spouse by saying you're going to leave them, the marriage never takes on the glue that a good marriage requires. If you suggest giving up on the marriage instead of dealing with the problems, you may make your spouse feel lost and unanchored. Your spouse should be your life support and you should be their life support. Having your spouse to hold on to should give you a feeling of well-being, a feeling of we're in this together, a feeling that we're never going to leave each other. When one partner suggests the possibility of divorce, the other feels like the rug has been pulled underneath them. If your marriage is steeped in insecurity, mistrust, and fear, or if you find yourself functioning out of coercion and dread, you can't act out of understanding and love. Forcing your spouse to tolerate mean or irrational behavior may work in the short term, but you know in the long term it's a disaster. People want their marriages to be eternal, able to endure anything. That means that if they're not happy, they have to get to work and get that marriage going and rework it. Just as a car that runs out of gas doesn't necessarily have to be thrown out, marriages often have to be refueled. The couple must figure out why there is unhappiness, why is there dissatisfaction. Remembering that they made a commitment to each other, they should uphold that commitment no matter what. In instances when one or both refuse to change, each spouse should follow some basic steps before resorting to divorce. If you're so angry, if you're so frustrated or tense that you aren't rationally processing the pros and cons of it, it may be advisable to go on antidepressant or even anxiety medication. Remember the things you liked about each other and figure out what you still can offer each other. Focus on these positive qualities. Force yourself to verbalize any pleasant thoughts or feelings. Thank you for a great dinner. I enjoyed your company when we went out. Thank you so much for taking care of Shabbos. Recall the good memories, putting the negative aspects of your marriage into perspective and recognize all you've built together. Archive exists in there of all the positive memories. Go there and take them out and share them. Imagine life without them. Imagine life without your spouse. Realistically determine if your problems will be solved by divorce. Try to determine the effect the divorce will have on your children and how your life will have to be reorganized to accommodate the new setup. Imagine life without your children around all the time. In most instances, parents take turns being with their children. Explore the financial consequences of a divorce. Life is much harder financially as a result of a divorce for everyone involved. Sometimes people jump into these things, the divorces, without realizing the difficult consequences, especially when children are involved. It should be the option of last resort. A single friend of mine once said, before anyone considers walking out on their marriage, tell them to go attend a singles event. They'll truly believe that should discourage them greatly. And that's so important. It's easy to stay married when everything is perfect. Sooner or later, problems complicate everyone's lives. Sometimes we undergo financial difficulties. Sometimes sickness and tragedies and life's turmoil are all trying. Little problems can make life seem overwhelming. And then the marriages seem to lose its luster. Rather than being there to support each other, sometimes we turn from allies to enemies. And what a tragedy that is. Sometimes people blame each other and resent that their spouses and giving them the security and protection they crave. But listen to this, a lady writes, who's much older. I grew up in the 40s and 50s with practical parents. My mother washed aluminum foil after she cooked in it and then reused it. My father was happier getting old shoes fixed than buying new ones. The marriage was good. Their dreams were focused. We could see them now, Dad in his trousers and t-shirt with a lawnmower in hand, and Mom in a house dress, the dish towel in her hand. It was a time of fixing things. A curtain rod, a kitchen radio, a screen door, an oven door, the hem of a dress. We kept things. It was a way of life. And sometimes it made us crazy. All that refixing, all that reheating, all that renewing, we wanted just once to be wasteful. Waste means affluence. Throwing things away meant there'd be more. But then my mother died, and on that clear summer night in the warmth of the hospital room, I was struck with the pain of learning that sometimes there isn't any more. Sometimes what we care about most gets all used up and goes away. Never to return to us. So while we have it, it's best that we love it and care for it and fix it when it's broken and heal it when it's sick. This is true for old cars and children with bad report cards and dogs with bad hips and aging parents and grandparents, and most importantly, it's true about marriage. We keep them because they're worth it, because we're worth it. Some things we keep. Now let me share an incredible story with you. Again, a beautiful Corona story that I wanted to close with. A lady writes, just give me a moment. My husband Mendel was receiving outpatient treatment for cancer in a prestigious Florida hospital. We were itching to get back to Europe for our granddaughter's wedding, which would take place 10 days before Pesach this past year. However, a week before Purim, the doctors told us we needed to stay a few more days for another round of treatment of chemotherapy. The timing was tight, but if all went smoothly, we could still make the wedding in Europe. Then reports of the coronavirus began dominating the news. By Purim, we began to realize that getting home back to Europe was not going to be as easy as we thought. Mendel was immunocompromised, and we were advised to avoid a commercial flight at all costs because he can catch an infection. In fact, the doctor warned us that if we took a commercial plane home, it might be Mendel's last and final journey. So there we were in a villa in Boca Raton in Florida, far away from family and friends, with no one to help us to get back home. On top of that, the owner had made it clear that we had to leave by Pesach. We had to leave and turn the keys back to the owner in Boca Raton. He had been exceptionally kind to us, allowing us to extend our stay over and over at a remarkably reduced price. But now he needed the place for Pesach. Every Pesach, he said, his daughter came with her family from New York, and as gracious as he was not about to give up on that. We needed to find new accommodations fast. We decided to go to New York, where a relative had offered us a basement apartment. As for my granddaughter's wedding, we took part via Zoom, smiling and wishing the Kala and Chas and Mazel Tovs through a haze of tears. My granddaughter was exceptionally mature and accepting, but I couldn't say the same for myself. I was crying and emotional for the next few days, missing my family desperately. This was the first family simcha we had ever missed, and it made me realize just how much my husband's illness had impacted our lives. Of course, I was grateful he was alive and well, but I desperately longed for our family and regular life. Within days, the world as we knew it had changed even further. The rise in the coronavirus epidemic cases had begun to affect everything, and there was barely a flight to be found. That meant driving instead of flying to New York, a city that already was very, very much seething with corona. A city that everyone was saying we should stay away from, as it wasn't safe for a sick man with a compromised immune system. We realized it made much more sense to stay in Florida, but where would we go? We needed to find a place, but nothing was available, and all the hotels were closed. The week before Pesach, our landlord reminded us again that we had to leave the house. There was no choice. We had to go to Brooklyn. At least there we would have a roof over our heads, as we were promised a basement to use. We planned to rent out a car, and my husband and I would split the driving. Our children, however, were up in arms. How could I take responsibility, they cried, for bringing their sick father to New York, where hundreds of Jews were fighting for their lives in overcrowded hospitals? It was risking his life. Children, I don't have a choice, she said. We have no place to stay. I can't take Tati to a hotel. None are open. There are no houses available for rent, and we can't stay on the street. We have no choice but to drive to Brooklyn. They knew I was right and began making more calls to find a place for us anywhere in Florida. I made calls as well, all to no avail. No one had a place for us to stay. The situation in Florida was getting worse. The Jewish community there warned New Yorkers to stay home and not risk infecting the locals, which was swamping the hospital system. Although we've been staying in Florida for months and had made friends, no one I called had any ideas for where we should stay. It was then that Sam Halabi, a kind-hearted Baal Chesed, a kind man in the community in Boca Raton, whom we became friendly with, pledged to help. He knew several people who owned vacation villas in the area and said he might be able to find something. However, he said, I want to warn you, it's not going to be cheap. On the Sunday before Pesach, we had packed up and were ready to drive to Brooklyn. I was terrified of the long drive with a sick husband who was completely immunocompromised, but I had no choice. I was sitting on the back deck, staring into the depths of the pool, contemplating our situation, trying to think if there was any other way we could go to Brooklyn or stay in Florida for Pesach, when my phone rang. It was Sam. I found a new home for you, he said, but it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. One of his business contacts, a man named Chet Mastery, had a vacation home in Hollywood that he was willing to rent through Pesach for $15,000 for the Pesach stay. The months of Mendel's hospitalizations and treatments had eaten up most of our savings, and by now we were seriously in debt. At the same time, finances couldn't be a factor when my husband's life was at stake. $15,000 was a considerable sum of money, but I felt we had no choice. I told him, we'll take the house. We got in touch with Chet. He had such a charming South American accent. He was probably from Brazil or Venezuela. I recognized the accent since Mendel had relatives who had settled in South America after the Holocaust. Most of them had since moved to Brooklyn. Chet stipulated that we must be out of the house after Pesach, as the central air conditioning system was not working well and had to be replaced. His crew was scheduled to come in right after Pesach. Because of the pandemic, he could not have people around while the repairmen were working, and he didn't want to push off the repairs. The system would break down completely if it's not going to be repaired soon. Moving to the house was an overwhelming task, as I had to do it by myself since my husband was just too sick to help me. After we unpacked, I began cooking for Pesach in a kitchen that was bigger than my entire house back in Europe. But that was small comfort. It wasn't easy looking forward to Pesach alone. I forced myself to look at the bright side. We had a roof over our heads, my husband was on the road to recovery, and right now, that's all that matters. We spent a quiet and lonely Pesach in the villa, grateful that we were alive and healthy, and that Mendel was feeling okay. The day after Pesach, Mr. Mastery called to remind us, you gotta go, because the workers are coming in tomorrow. Now, if you remember anything about this year, Pesach ended Thursday night, which means that the very next day was Friday. Now they had to have accommodations for Shabbos, and they couldn't think about driving to New York on a Friday. So she asked him, can we stay until after Shabbos? She begged him and begged him. There's no time for us to head to New York today, and we have nowhere else to go. Okay, Chet said, you could stay for Shabbos, but you must leave on Sunday morning. Once again, I got phone calls from concerned friends and family members who warned us to stay in Florida and not endanger my husband's life by going back to New York, which was seething with corona infections. If you find us an apartment here, even a hole in the wall in Florida, I'll consider staying. On Motzei Shabbos, Sam called to see how we were doing. I mentioned to Chet that you were driving to New York. He said he feels terrible, but he wouldn't change his mind. In any case, I think you should call and thank him again for letting you stay for Shabbos. I called Chet to thank him and tell him how much we enjoyed staying in his home. We'd like to thank you in person, I said. Are you coming by tomorrow? I wasn't planning to, Chet said. On second thought though, maybe I will come by tonight. I need to check on some things before the repairmen come. I'll be there in about an hour. Okay, I said reluctantly, because it was late and I wanted to make an early night of it so we could start our drive to New York the following day. I finished packing while we waited for Chet. Mendel was dozing on the couch. He was pale despite the Florida sunshine, and he hadn't been eating well. I hoped he was okay. At 11:15, Chet rang our bell. He was tanned, a muscular man of middle age, with a shock of grizzled gray hair on his small kippah. I invited him in and we expressed our gratitude for his incredible generosity. He meant so much to us that you were able to stay for Shabbos, I said. We're driving back to New York tomorrow morning, God willing, and we'll stay with relatives in Brooklyn. Are you sure your husband is up to the drive? Chet asked, looking concerned. He looked at my husband and he said, boy, he doesn't look very well at all. I'm okay, Mendel protested, but his appearance could see that he wasn't telling the truth. Even in the dim lighting, his paleness was obvious. "I'm sorry I have to go back to New York. I hear it's a nightmare there," Chet shuddered. "I was there on a business trip, never going back there again." "Where are you from?" I asked him. Chet smiled. "I'm from Caracas, Venezuela, but you probably know that already from my accent. I haven't been back there in 30 years. It's crazy that right now in Caracas," he said. "People are hungry. The stores are empty. When I was a boy, Venezuela was a very rich country," Chet said. "My mother was a Holocaust survivor who couldn't get a visa to America, so she went to Venezuela, where she met my father. They got married and raised my brother and me there. My father was traditional, but my mother kept a kosher home. We went to the local Hebrew school because my mother insisted. Otherwise, I don't know if I would even be Shomer Shabbat today. Whatever I am today is in the merit of my old friend David and his family." Chet explained that most of his classmates came from non-observant homes, but there was one boy named David whose father was a rabbi and who was such a wonderful person that Chet used to go to this boy's house all the time. And he said David was brilliant and he always got top marks. What I admired about him was that his midot, his character, was impeccable. He spent hours studying with other students who didn't understand Hebrew, teaching them patiently, even if he didn't need to study at all. He was always helping other boys out. He was my role model, and he still is to this day, even though I haven't seen him in decades. Chet told us that he had been good friends with David in elementary school, but they parted ways in high school when David was sent to yeshiva in New York to complete his education. "Whatever I am today," Chet said, "is thanks to my friend David. When I made the decision to marry my wife, I told her I wanted a home like David's parents' home, where our children would be dressed tzanua, modestly, and have good midot. If she hadn't agreed, it was the deal breaker for me, but she did, and thank God we have a great home with great kids." Whatever happened to David? Is he still in Caracas, I wondered? "No, I haven't seen him since elementary school. His family left Venezuela after his brother was killed tragically in a car accident. I don't know where even he lives today." Suddenly Mendel, my husband, sat up with a strange expression on his face. "What was David's family name?" my husband asked Chet. "I think it was Cohen, something like that." Mendel had opened his phone and was frantically thumbing through the pictures. "Here, take a look at this picture." Mendel showed Chet his cell phone. "Is this the David you're talking about?" Now it was Chet's turn to gasp. He stared at the picture of the middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard and began to tremble. "This looks exactly like David's father. The way David's father looked when we were growing up. Where'd you get this picture from?" "David Cohen," Mendel said, "is my first cousin. Our mothers are sisters," Mendel told him. "And this is the picture of what David looks like now. My mother sent me this picture from his son's wedding, which just took place a couple of weeks ago. My aunt and uncle left Venezuela after their son was killed. Today they all live in Brooklyn. In fact, David is the one who's giving us a place to stay up there." "Wow, David's your first cousin?" Chet said. "Wait a minute, are you sure we're talking about the same person? How many other Davids are there who look exactly like your childhood friend's father, who is the same age now and whose brother was in a car accident in Venezuela?" I asked him. "Let's get David on the phone and you can ask him yourself." So we dialed David's cell number, figuring that if he was sleeping, he would have closed it. He picked up after the first ring, and we asked him if he remembered someone from Venezuela named Chet Masri. Then I handed Chet the phone. After making sure David was really his childhood friend, Chet went on the phone and spoke to him for over an hour. I heard the sounds of laughter and tears as they reminisced about their lives. 40 years they hadn't seen each other, and the twists and turns they had both experienced. When Chet finally came in, he was overcome with emotion. "I want to thank you," he said. "I've been hoping to reconnect with David for many years and tell him what an impact he and his family had on my life. I can't believe I finally found him." "It was our pleasure," I said to him. "David was telling me about all your illness and how hard it is for you and your wife to leave," he said to Mendel. "I decided I can't let you go to New York where you catch the virus. God forbid. I'm canceling the repairmen, and you can stay here in this villa for another month." "Are you sure?" we said. "We've been ready to go to New York. Our belongings are packed, the car are rented. I'm not sure we can afford it anyway, even if you give it to us for a month." And Chet made the most remarkable statement. "Don't worry about the money," with a wave of his hand. "It would be an honor and privilege to host David's cousins free of charge." And that's what happened. And Baruch Hashem, this is what it means like for Klal Yisrael to come together, ladies and gentlemen, in the time of an epidemic. You know what it means? Kelev echad. We are one heart, we are one body, we are one nation. Let me take this golden opportunity to wish you all a fantastic Shavuos. And just to close, anybody anywhere in the world who would like my help in Shidduchim or putting together a top 10 list, or would like a dating analysis of their relationship, who needs help in dating or training in video dating, especially a lot of people are calling me to help in video training in video dating training, which is the paradigm now, feel free to reach out to me on 305-206-1916 or drjackcohen1818 at gmail.com. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.